Talkin' Aliens, the William Cleere podcast.
And we're off. The hot chick has spoken, and she is right. I am William Cleere. This is Pop Talkin' Aliens, and it is a podcast. Morrissey, his importance, his influence, but mainly I'm going to just talk about his music. I'm going to go through Morrissey's album collection chronologically, tell you a little about him, tell you about what I think of him, kind of rank them, but I'm not going to do the whole worst to first thing because there's a sort of narrative that goes along with Morrissey's solo career, and to go jumping around in the history of his albums and ranking them, you'd kind of lose the story. So I want to keep the integrity of that, so I will just go chronologically through his albums and talk about them with you. But first, let's talk about who Morrissey is. Shamefully and depressingly. Two words that go well with Morrissey, but in the different context, shamefully and depressingly, I have learned over the last few years in talking to people in their early 30s and especially in their 20s, they don't really know who he is. They don't really know who Morrissey is, and they don't know who the Smiths were. And to me, it's a shame, because the Smiths, as anyone 40 or even I would think in their 30s would know, hugely influential band. Hugely influential British band. You know, talk to Radiohead, talk to Oasis, talk to Billy Bragg, talk to Bono. I mean, so many people, so many significant pop stars who have been influenced by the Smiths and then by Morrissey as a solo artist. Now, I'm going to focus on Morrissey as a solo artist in his album career because for a couple of reasons. There's a lot of Morrissey solo albums. He's been a solo artist now for 30 years. And the Smiths were only together for 5 years. For as much influence as the Smiths had, they only made 4 albums. Now, there were 3 compilations, Hatful of Hollow, The World Won't Listen, and Louder Than Bombs, I believe, were the only ones. There might have been more, but compilations are compilations, and I try to stay out of that. Now, I'm going to have to deal with compilations a little bit when I talk about Morrissey's albums because he's released quite a few, and he kind of tricks people into buying them by putting tracks on them that you couldn't otherwise get. So I'll get into that. But in terms of the Smiths studio albums, I will rank them right here and now. Number 1, The Smiths. Debut album, simply called The Smiths. Number 1, Meat is Murder. Number 1, The Queen is Dead. Number 1, Strange Ways, Here We Come. So there you go. All 4 Smiths albums ranked. Number 1, number 1, and number 1, and number 1. Their catalog is fucking awesome. I mean, they were together such a short period of time that the material they put out was, I mean, not always, but mostly flawless. They were just a perfect band. And they changed a lot of things because, specifically Morrissey, being a singer who sounds like some sort of crooner in this very unusual soft voice, a very versatile voice that had an edge to it but was also very comforting and very soft. When you look at a song like How Soon Is Now with Johnny Marr's edgy guitar going on and then Morrissey's voice, it's this juxtaposition that you really don't find very often at all. And I think a lot of what has kept Morrissey so popular is the sound of his voice. It is so unique. But when you put it together with what he sings, it's amazing. I mean, here is a guy who was not afraid to completely open up about being isolated, disconnected, depressed, fucking pissed off, and just let it all out there. And the thing about Morrissey, the thing that makes that so great as he continues to do it today, is that he really is that person. You don't see, and listen, Morrissey is photographed a lot. He's got some very dedicated fans who follow him around with phones, and he never gets caught doing anything that is out of character with whom he portrays as himself. He's always alone. He talks about being asexual, right? That he's not into, that, he likes guys and he likes girls, but he never has a relationship because he's not equipped to do so. And, he's all fucked up inside. And it's true. From his autobiography and from what fans have spotted, he's had a boyfriend and a girlfriend over like 30 years. Now, maybe there's more people behind closed doors, but I'm telling you, the guy, you never see him at some lavish Hollywood party. He's never palling around with people. In a recent example, that movie that came out starring Tom Hardy as the Cray brothers, the British gangsters from, I believe, the 60s. Morrissey wrote a song about those guys in the 80s or in the 90s called Last of the Famous International Playboys. And so he went to the premiere of this movie. In the red carpet photos of the people going to see the premiere of that movie, there's old Morrissey all by his lonesome. Yeah, looking at the camera like, what do you want from me? I'm just here to see the movie. God bless him. But nevertheless, he is quite a public figure, at least to his cult following. Morrissey's album sales are never breaking the bank. You don't see him with hit singles. He tours. He cancels a lot of shows because depression or just being a diva. I don't know. Because he's weird. That's part of the Morrissey experience, is that he might cancel his show because he's weird. As weird as he is in his music. I recently had the opportunity to go see Morrissey at San Jose State University, and I have been given the shaft on many, many Morrissey shows that he's canceled. I have bought tickets. I have been all excited, only to have the door slammed in my face when he cancels. So I bought tickets to this show thinking he'll go to San Jose. Why? Because Morrissey has a huge, huge Mexican following. He's gigantic in Mexico. That is the country in which he is most famous, even more so than his home country of the UK. Now, why Mexicans love him so much, nobody can figure it out, even him. There was actually a study done. It was a student study, but it was done at either Harvard or Stanford. One of the big schools. Someone wrote like a thesis about why Morrissey is so popular with Mexicans, and a couple of the reasons that they came up with. One of them was his voice, that he has the unique voice that I spoke about before, sort of the crooner thing going for him. And the other was that he has the ability to tap into people who feel sort of like they're on the outside. And I don't know if that's the case with the Mexican people. I don't sociologically know a lot about Mexicans as a people. I just know them individually. Each one is their own personality, so I can't pin them down to think, well, yes, they're disconnected, so they would appeal to Morrissey. I don't know why. But anyway, he did play. He did play at this San Jose State show, and huge contingent of Mexican people from the Mexican Americans from the San Jose area. And the show was amazing. It was a great show. And Morrissey is in his late 50s now, and he sounded young. He acted young. He was full of life. It was the best I've seen him. I've seen him 3 times. I would have seen him about 7, except for the cancellations, but I've seen him 3 times. And it was by far the best time. But part of that experience was wondering, up until he literally walked on stage, whether or not he would literally walk on stage. I mean, you never know. You never know when he's going to cancel. And that guy will not cancel within a reasonable period of time. He'll cancel 5 minutes before the show if he feels like it. But I was lucky. He didn't cancel, and he put on a fantastic show. And at this point in Morrissey's career, he actually does play a few Smiths songs, which is nice because when he was first breaking in as a solo artist, he understandably wanted to separate himself from that, so it was all solo material all the time. No Smiths, but now we got some Smiths. Oh, it was so good. But anyway, I can sit here and talk about how good it is. Let's talk about Morrissey's solo career. In 1987, the Smiths recorded their final album, which was called Strange Ways, Here We Come. Strange Ways being I believe, a prison in England. It's a great album. Their sound was becoming more and more rich. It was interesting to hear where they might have gone after Strange Ways, but all they did was break up. And Morrissey and Marr, they've never really spoken since. To this day, Johnny Marr, the great guitar player for the Smiths. So Morrissey was thrust into the position of being a solo artist, and the record company wanted product quickly. So his debut album came out in 1988, and it was Viva Hate, 1988, Morrissey's solo debut. He tapped Stephen Street to produce this album, and Street is credited with writing the music for all the songs. And the album is chock full of session musicians, one of which, actually, Vinnie Riley, the drummer, claims, if you believe seedy Morrissey fan sites on the internet, he claims that he actually wrote the majority of the music on Viva Hate. But if you believe all published sources, it was Stephen Street. But it's important to keep in mind that regardless of who is actually writing the music for Morrissey songs, when he gets the music, he's just basically getting chord progressions. The melodies, the hooks, they come from him. He just puts his lyrical magic together. He works out a melody over the chord progression, and that's when we get a great Morrissey song. To take nothing away from the guys that write the chord progressions, because with any great Morrissey song, they're awesome. But to illustrate it, I'm actually going to play you here a little bit of the last of the famous international playboys. I'm going to play you what Morrissey, basically what he is given to work with, and then what he comes up with. So let's take a listen. So that's a great example. That melody was not written when that song was given to Morrissey. He came up with the lyrics and he came up with that melody, which is chock full of hooks, expansive over one simple chord progression. So job well done, Moz. Let's hear one more. This is a song from a later era that we'll talk about in a bit called The More You Ignore Me, The Closer I Get. And that was a hit song. It's got a great hook, and if you listen to the instrumental part that started off with, I mean, it's a great chord progression, and it's got this cool little counter melody coming out of the guitar. But what makes that song is what Morrissey did with it. That's what the man does, among so many other things. But back to Viva Hate. Moz is looking to bust out as a solo artist, and he actually thought about tapping the Smiths rhythm section to be on Viva Hate, but he eventually changed his mind because he wanted it to be a truly solo album. But he did actually get those two guys to play on a couple of songs that ended up on Bona Drag. Those songs being the aforementioned last of the famous international playboys, as well as Hairdresser on Fire, which, again, those did not appear on Viva Hate, but they did appear on the follow-up, which was Bona Drag. Which brings us to Bona Drag from 1990. Now, technically, this album is a compilation, but in my mind, it's an album. I have to count it as an album. 14 tracks, and there's only, I think, 3 that appeared on Viva Hate. Most of these songs were B-sides from singles from Viva Hate. They were bonus tracks, or they were singles on their own that didn't come from an album, so that's why it's called a compilation. But to me, it's a record, and it's a defining record. Although it's culled together from various releases, fuck it, it's an album, and it's awesome. And again, mostly Stephen Street, with a few exceptions. November Spawned a Monster, Interesting Drug, He Knows I'd Love to See Him, Hairdresser on Fire. These are all classic Morrissey songs, and they come from Bona Drag. They might come from the back side of some 45-inch album. It doesn't matter. Interestingly, the song Suede Head was, I don't know if you'd call it a hit, but in terms of being sort of a cult artist like Morrissey was, it was kind of a hit at the time. It's actually from Viva Hate, but it is also included on Bona Drag as well. And as a side note, if you listen to Ryan Adams' album Heartbreaker, the beginning of the album is actually an argument between, it's like studio banter that was recorded, an argument between Ryan Adams and one of the producers about which album Suede Head appeared on. One says Bona Drag, the other says Viva Hate, and the best part is they're both right. One of the songs on the album, Yes, I Am Blind, which is one of Morrissey's truly depressing songs, one of those songs that doesn't really have any sort of sarcastic or humorous edge to it. It's just depressing about not being able to see any of the good in life and only being able to see what is shitty. That song, the music was actually written by Andy Rourke from The Smiths. One of the only times, if not, I think the only time that Morrissey collaborated songwriting-wise with a Smith outside of Johnny Marr when they were in The Smiths. Bona Drag, it sounds a lot like Viva Hate because everything was recorded within that same time period, but the material overall, to my mind, is much better. I definitely put it high on the list of albums that I would recommend in terms of Morrissey, but make sure you get the 2010 remaster. Usually for me, remastered means very little. It just usually means that it's louder, and then sometimes there's more bass. But in some cases, it makes a hell of a difference, and this is one of them. Bona Drag is a great album, and the remastered version of it really brings it to life. So I highly recommend it. And the next album I highly do not recommend. That is 1991's Kill Uncle. It's a big step down from Viva Hate and from Bona Drag. Gone is Stephen Street on this one, and he was replaced by a guy named Mark Nevin for a couple of songs. Clive Langer was another co-writer, and he's actually a piano player. And Morrissey usually would co-write with guitar players, so the Clive Langer songs are different. You can tell mostly from the prominence of piano and keyboards and the writing style that it doesn't really match up to the overall catalog of Morrissey songs, which is fine, because this album does broaden the scope a little bit from Bona Drag and Kill Uncle, but the Clive Langer songs tend to stand out like a sore thumb. One of them being a song called Mute Witness, which you may have heard of. There was a movie that stole that title, and it's a good thing they didn't steal the song, because the song is not very good, but the title is quite good. The song kind of sounds like a Journey song. It's got like this chorused keyboard that leads off the song and kind of drives it, and it is literally about a mute witness. I mean, there's no clever angle that he took. It's just about a witness on a witness stand flailing her arms and frustratingly can't tell the story of the crime because she's mute. But there's other decent tunes on it. It leads off with a song called Our Frank, which has one of my favorite Morrissey lyrics, which is, "Give us a drink and make it quick, or else we're going to be sick all over." I personally ripped that song off when I was 16 and wrote a song called Big Heartbreaker. But that's neither here nor there. The highlight of the album is Sing Your Life. It's not a song that Morrissey plays live, but it's definitely a cult classic amongst the cult of Morrissey fans. The cult within a cult. It's a song that the arrangement on the album version, it's kind of like it sounds like it's underwater. There's a lot of weird keyboards and it's in an odd key. The melody doesn't always match up to the actual chords. It's strange but in a cool way. And the lyrics are, "Look, you're gonna die. Why not get some shit off your chest? Hit the mic. Everybody else does, so fuck it. Why don't you do it too?" Basically the logic that sent me into doing this podcast. He did a live version of it at K-Rock in LA with his new band in 1992, and it was completely rearranged to be a rockabilly number, and it totally comes to life in that version. It's an awesome song and played awesomely by his new band, which we are going to become familiar with in just a few minutes here. But to talk a little more about Kill Uncle, there's another loser on this album called King Lear, and Lear is spelled Leer. The whole song is just an awful collection of puns and double entendres set to some sort of circusy piano, which, among other less than desirable songs on this album, led Morrissey to describe it in his autobiography as shamefully describe it as an orphan that he finds difficult to feed. But the closer of the album is an orphan that deserves to be fed. And I have personally fed it by covering it on my own. And I don't mean to talk too much about my own musicianship. It's not important to this podcast. But my band did cover the closer of Kill Uncle, and it's called There Is a Place in Hell for Me and My Friends. That is a diamond on this album, the closer. It's short, it's sweet, it's under 2 minutes, and it's armed with only a piano and a cello, and then a huge reverberated snare drum at the end. And the song is Morrissey basically comforting himself in the notion that once he dies and finally rests in hell, he'll be among his friends, and he'll be allowed to cry whenever he wants. Now, when describing it like that, that sounds like the exact thing that someone would think when they think about Morrissey. The cliche, one-dimensional artist, he sings about crying all the time, but again, it's not just that. He's crying in hell, and he knows that that's funny. As much as it is bizarre and isolated, depressing and sad, it's fucking hilarious. All that we hope is when we go, our skin and our blood and our bones won't get in your way the way they did when we lived. He knows that's funny. And it's also terrible. And it's what separates him from The Cure or whatever fucking depressing band you think of, because to be able to laugh at yourself when you're that depressed, that is brilliance. That is artistry. And it's maybe that kind of dark ass shit isn't your thing. Fine. But it's brilliant. Now, speaking of the K-Rock show that I mentioned with his new rockabilly band, he played this song, There's a Place in Hell for Me and My Friends, and he sped it up about 10 times its original speed, and he kind of turned it into a demented 50s pop song, which is even more brilliant than it was before. And it's made by the band that would propel him into finding his own voice, basically, as a solo artist, and bringing a cohesive sound and a feel to his next several albums, starting with more of that rockabilly, the rockabilly-fueled Your Arsenal. 1992 is when we found Your Arsenal in our local record stores, when such things existed, and it was full of rockabilly, attitude, and sound, produced by Mick Ronson of David Bowie fame. Morrissey's main co-writer on this one was Alan White, his new lead guitarist back with Boz Boorer on rhythm guitar. Alan White and Boz Boorer, they became the new two-headed Johnny Marr. They were edgy, it was punk rockabilly, it was like almost faux punk at times. And these dudes went on tour, actually they went on tour for Kill Uncle, and that's how they cut their teeth with Morrissey. And they turned basically every song from Kill Uncle and Bona Drag and Viva Hate into a rockabilly song. And they had pompadours, folded up bottoms of their jeans, they looked fucking cool. The perfect framework for Morrissey to work within. And so they stayed on to write and to perform on Your Arsenal, and Alan White would remain the part of the two-headed Johnny Marr for years, and Boz Boorer himself actually still plays and writes with Morrissey to this day, which, considering how weird Morrissey is, that's quite an achievement. I imagine Boz Boorer is like the dude who only speaks when spoken to, because like to be able to survive the fucking weirdness of that guy for it's 24 years now is remarkable. Your Arsenal is a masterpiece. It's arguably his best album. Might be You Are the Quarry, which we're going to come and talk about in a bit, but Your Arsenal is in the discussion for best Morrissey albums. There's surf elements, again, punk, 50s. One of the songs, The National Front Disco, is this thrashing epic about a dude who decides to turn into an English racist skinhead. English History X, and certainly written before American History X. But this song got a huge amount of flack for being racist, for glorifying the Nazi skinhead party of England. Everyone was missing the point. See, The National Front Disco is a song lamenting to a lost friend, pleading for him not to join the English skinhead movement. But the reason, I guess, is that pissed people off is because it's called the National Front Disco. Like Morrissey was trying to make it cool. He's making fun of it. The National Front Disco, that's fucking funny. And it's depressing. And it comments on racism. So few people look at this stuff close enough to even begin to realize what any of this is. But you know what? That's why I'm here. To take you through it. To make you reconsider. Now, there is a song on this album that actually is depressing with no comfort, no humor, just as dark as shit gets for Morrissey. And that is Seasick Yet Still Docked. You can tell I have never really loved. You can tell by the way I sleep all day. Now, it's funny when we talk about it here, but when you hear the song, if you're someone who, feels isolated and depressed and unloved, and this song is the anthem of your life, my friend. And technique-wise, it hardly even rhymes sometimes. And only Morrissey, the way he sings, the way he draws out notes, the way he kind of just floats through phrasing, he can pull that off. And it's almost like he's reading an unstructured poem over this song, which is full of sort of weird sound effects and clocks ticking and very ethereal, lots of acoustic guitar. I mean, if you ever really just need to wallow, Seasick Yet Still Docked is the recipe for you, my friend. But what comes out of it, a song, it gently just flows into the next song, which is actually called I Know It's Gonna Happen Someday. And it's one of the very few Morrissey tracks that is, in fact, uplifting, where he is actually encouraging the listener to hold on. I know things are shitty now. I know it seems like they're never going to get better, but they will. Maybe they will. It is Morrissey. Your Arsenal also has the hilarious sing-along track, We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful. The chorus of this song is Morrissey melodically laughing.
It's really laughable.
It's great. It's Morrissey talking about how, well, basically we hate it when our friends become successful. And he's doing it from the standpoint of the successful people being musicians and how much he can't stand when a fellow musician becomes successful, especially if they're from Manchester. I mean, Morrissey is famous as shit in his own way. He's not short on cash. He can fill his medium-sized venues to till the cows come home. He did a residency at the Fillmore in San Francisco, like 6 shows in a row, all sold out. He sells out Madison Square Garden. He's not selling out stadiums around the world, but he's big enough. He's big enough to where you need to be worrying about what other people are getting successful on. But the fact that he speaks for people that are fucking pissed off and unhappy. And he does it with a smile and a tear. That's Morrissey. So, moving on from Your Arsenal, we have the follow-up, which is 1994's Vauxhall and I. Now, like Your Arsenal, it's a very cohesive album, and songwriting-wise, it's the same duo. Although the rockabilly thing is completely missing from Vauxhall. He moved on from that, and it doesn't hurt it. Morrissey has already established himself at this point with a wide enough repertoire of different types of music, different styles of songs, that when he comes out with a new album, you're not expecting a rockabilly punk type thing. You're just expecting Morrissey, and he delivers on Vauxhall and I. This one is produced by Steve Lillywhite, and again, Boz and Alan White are back composing the material. And it's a lot more mellow, a lot more acoustic guitars than Your Arsenal. There's a few more keyboards. There's some synth-type atmosphere here and there. And it even opens with a ballad, Now My Heart Is Full, which is an epic tune in his catalog, and he still plays live. It is actually written, Now My Heart Is Full, in capital letters, so I'm not doing my usual shtick. That's what it's called, Now My Heart Is Full. And interestingly, the B-side to this song, which was a rather unsuccessful single, the B-side is Moon River, a goddamn cover of Moon River. And not only that, Morrissey changes some of the lyrics to make it depressing. A depressing swamp of hopelessness as opposed to a journey down a joyful river. It's true. Instead of the original line in the song, for example, which is waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, moon, river, and me, Morrissey's version says, waiting round the bend, it's just around the bend, it's always just around the bend. And he leaves it at that. And again, the song Now My Heart Is Full was not a hit, the A-side to Moon River. Neither was Moon River, but it wasn't trying to be. But the album did have a hit. It had a huge hit, which is a song that I played a little bit of for you earlier. The More You Ignore Me, the Closer I Get. When this song was released 22 years ago, MTV showed it relentlessly, back when they showed videos. So this is Morrissey probably at the peak of his solo career at this point. And there's not a bad song on Vauxhall and I. And there's some beautiful shit on this album. The song Hold On To Your Friends, which was co-written by Alan White. It has a beautiful guitar hook, little counter melodies between Alan White and Boz Boorer. And the song is about how you should go ahead and burn all your clothes, smoke and explode, as long as you hold on to your friends. Sung in the way that only Morrissey could. There's a song called Lifeguard Sleeping, Girl Drowning, which the title basically gives it away. It's about a girl who wants attention, swims out too far, starts screaming. The lifeguard doesn't hear her because he's been sleeping, because he's had such a busy day doing his lifeguarding. And she eventually dies. She cried wolf. She lost out. The album closes with the song Speedway, which is basically Morrissey saying, there's a lot of rumors about me, mainly about his sexuality. And he doesn't deny them. He doesn't confirm them. And if he wanted to, he could drag you into the middle of it.
I could have mentioned your name, I could have dragged you in, guilt by implication, by association. I've always been true to you, in my own strange way. I've always been true to you, in my own sick way. I'll always stay true to you.
And it's great. There's a fucking chainsaw that goes on in the middle of this song, leading into the pounding of tom-toms. It's a great album. It's a great song. At this point, the music of Alan White and Boz Boorer, they both wrote songs for Morrissey on this album. But in terms of how they write, it's almost indistinguishable, and it's great. These guys are great songwriters, and they create a palette for Moz to write over it's perfect. I mean, outside of Johnny Marr, nobody has written better tunes for Moz than these two guys. So, next up, 1995, I said I'll skip compilations, but I'll just mention briefly that there was a compilation released in 95 called World of Morrissey. And it contained mostly material from a 1993 live album called Beethoven Was Deaf, which was released after the Your Arsenal tour. And it's awesome. It should be mentioned because it's a great live album, but a lot of what World of Morrissey is just highlights from that album. And it contains a couple of new tracks, so I'll mention it, because it does have a song that's a great tune called Boxers. It's one of my faves. It's about a boxer who, of course, loses the big fight, and but his family still loves him. Anyway, 1995, also after World of Morrissey, brought us a proper album, Southpaw Grammar. Southpaw Grammar is weird. It's weird. The first song on the album is called The Teachers Are Afraid of the Pupils. It features a symphony sample from a German composer, I forget the name, but it loops part of the symphony over and over and over again, and it takes forever before the vocals start. The song is, the lyrics are kind of pedestrian. It's about students taking over the classrooms and shit like that, stuff to appeal to the teenagers that are still listening to Morrissey, or the teenagers within us, older fans that are still listening to Morrissey. But it's 11 minutes long, far longer than anything Morrissey had come up with before this. And the album ends with a song called Southpaw, which is 10 minutes long. It's kind of a cool song when the singing is happening, but the rest of it is just Alan White and Boz Boorer dicking around on guitars. it's an uneven album. There's a song called The Operation, which has a drum solo that goes on for about 3 minutes before they start singing, and it's not even a good drum solo. But the album has its moments. The song called Reader Meet Author, about book signing, where some, hack writer who writes about troubled people is confronted by those troubled people, and it turns out that he's, just a fucking asshole who lives up in a mansion and dreams this shit up. But for the most part, Southpaw Grammar is, I don't know if it's an attempt to be like punk. It's definitely edgy. There's no ballads. It's distortion guitar as far as the eye can see, or as far as the ear can hear, anyway. It wasn't critically received well. It didn't sell well. It was kind of, Morrissey wanted to take a left turn and do something different, and it didn't really work out. So, following up to Southpaw, because there's not a lot to say about Southpaw Grammar. It's definitely the last album that you'd want to choose in a Morrissey starter kit. It's not representative of the kind of music that he plays. The lyrics are, not definitely his best work. And it was followed up by an album that was unfortunately, possibly, not even as good as that, which was 1997's Maladjusted. We are now at the decline of chapter 1 of Morrissey's solo career. Maladjusted, it was a huge drop-off. It was also the beginning of an extended hibernation for Morrissey. The first sign that things are going wrong is the cover. It's like a silverfish plain background with Morrissey squatting in front of it, and he's wearing some kind of sweater. Interestingly, and by no coincidence, it was the only record that Morrissey himself did not design the cover for. And he hates that cover, as he should. And he doesn't like the album. Neither do I, along with most fans. But it does have its moments, and there's almost enough on here to salvage the album, but not quite enough. But there are a few highlights, so let's go over those. Alma Matters being the first. Yes, Alma Matters, not Alma Maters. This is Morrissey we're talking about. Puns, puns, puns. Which is basically a song about how Morrissey is reserving the right to destroy his own life, whether you like it or not, because it's his life to destroy. There's also a cool tune called Ammunition, where Morrissey sings about how he's not mad at anyone anymore, which is actually horseshit at this point, because the year before Maladjusted, and possibly a reason that influences why Maladjusted is not very good, is the fact that he lost a lawsuit from Mike Joyce from the Smiths, who claimed he was not paid enough royalties. And he ultimately won. And Morrissey and Johnny Marr ended up paying out some fucking ludicrous amount of money to the Smiths rhythm section, who was, with all due respect, not very integral to that band. I mean, they did lend to the sound, and they do provide a sort of unique styling that definitely shapes the Smiths. But at the end of the day, if the Smiths had gone on after Strange Ways, Here We Come, with a new bass player and a new drummer, nobody would have been crying. But anyway, Morrissey was infuriated by this lawsuit. He devotes a third of his autobiography complaining about it, and actually even saying that he wishes Mike Joyce nothing but the worst for the rest of his life. And he addresses it on this album, long after he's sung the song Ammunition about how he's not mad at anybody anymore. We get the Joyce outburst in the song Sorrow Will Come in the End. This is one of Morrissey's worst songs of all time. He doesn't even sing. He talks over a bunch of fake violins.
Lawyer, liar, lawyer, liar.
Hideous song. And it actually was left off the UK of the release, so lucky you, England. Sorrow will come in the end. And it definitely does. But the album caps off with a classic Morrissey tune called Satan Rejected My Soul. As opposed to There Is a Place in Hell for Me and My Friends, there is evidently no place in hell for Morrissey. No place in heaven for Morrissey. Satan has rejected his soul because as low as he goes, he never quite goes this low. So Morrissey is now homeless between heaven and hell, with no place to go, begging someone to buy his soul. One other song on this album that almost rescues it, and is definitely, as far as a standalone song, worth hearing, is called Trouble Loves Me. It's a more piano-based song where Morrissey talks about how no matter where he goes, no matter what he does, trouble will always find him, trouble loves him, And, when I describe these songs and I describe the premise, it's like, well, of course that, it's Morrissey is going to sing about how trouble follows him all around. Well, of course he's going to. But, again, the cleverness of the song, the way he sings it, what I can do to Morrissey songs is tell you why they're good, try to clear up some misconceptions, but I cannot deliver the goods on how special they are. You're just going to have to listen. And hopefully I can convince you to do so with some of these. So I don't recommend picking up Maladjusted, but if you want to go on iTunes or something, listen to Trouble Loves Me, listen to Satan Rejected My Soul, listen to Allah Matters, and leave it at that. After the not so successful run of Maladjusted, Morrissey was left without a record contract for the next 7 years. And a lot of that, I think, probably just had to do with him being picky, being burnt out. He moved to LA and he toured occasionally, but he was still writing songs, and some of those songs made it to later releases like First of the Gang to Die, which would find its way onto his next album. But no new album was ever in sight all of these years. It was never even on the horizon. It was just Morrissey tours, Morrissey hangs out. He's never seen anywhere. He doesn't present awards. You never see him showing up at things. When he is spotted, like at a fucking cafe in Los Angeles, alone, as always. But in 2002, there was a documentary made about him called The Importance of Being Morrissey. And if you are a fan of Morrissey at all, you definitely need to check this one out. It's the most in-depth sort of, behind-the-scenes look at Morrissey's life. And it also details Morrissey developing that huge group of Mexican fans that I talked about earlier. I mean, he played Mexico to like a Beatles reception a whole bunch of times during this sabbatical from recording. But eventually, he finally found someone who appealed to him enough to convince him to come back into the studio. And in 2004, that resulted in You Are the Quarry. And this album is arguably up against Your Arsenal, in my opinion, possibly his best album. It starts with the cover. Unlike Maladjusted, which was, again, a picture of him in a sweater squatting, the cover to You Are the Quarry is Morrissey in a suit, perfect hair, holding a Tommy gun in front of like a pink satin background. It was produced by Jerry Finn, who had produced some stuff for Blink-182. It returns Alan White and Boz Boorer to their proper positions as the two-headed songwriter. Now, when I say that, I don't mean they didn't write songs together for him. It was always an Alan White song or a Boz Boorer song. There's no Morrissey, Boorer, White songs. It's just one or the other. Usually more Alan White, but Boz kicks in great tunes. The album leads off with a song called America Is Not the World. And in this album, Morrissey had a whole bunch more keyboard stuff. The production was a lot slicker and a lot more rich than Maladjusted and certainly Southpaw Grammar, which was just a bunch of fucking guitars. America Is Not the World is a great way for Morrissey to jump back into the limelight. I mean, what this song does is he basically just rips on America for being racist, homophobic, meat-eating, carnivorous, and then tells America, I love you, I love you, I love you, for the remaining minute and a half of the song. It's great.
And I love you, I love you, I love you.
And the album is chock full of Morrissey gems. Irish Blood, English Heart is a guitar-driven, crazy keyboard sound effect having song about Morrissey's war within himself, his Irish half versus his English half. And he takes every opportunity he can to take shots at the royal family and the history of royalty in England, which is a big thing with him, if I didn't mention that before. Morrissey hates the royal family. And he also hates eating meat, people who eat meat, to the point where at his shows he actually demands that the venue not serve meat during his shows. And they comply. It's pretty amazing. He actually went on Stephen Colbert one time. Colbert mentioned during the interview that, again, it was the same deal. They were not allowed to have any meat backstage, no meat products, no animal products, and he can get away with it. But that kind of thing doesn't really influence You Are the Quarry. But it's worth knowing. It's part of the story and his self-importance, which often turns into self-deprecation and back again and so on and so on. But another jewel on this album, I Have Forgiven Jesus. This is one of my favorite Morrissey spins on a topic. In this one, he turns the table on Jesus by doing him the favor of forgiving him. Morrissey himself asks for no forgiveness, because after all, what did he do? Aside from being weighed down by all the imperfections and unfulfilled desires that God gave him, even ending the song by screaming in a Morrissey way, to Jesus, "Do you hate me? Do you hate me? Do you hate me?" But ultimately, he forgives Jesus. And these are the kinds of spins on ideas that separate Morrissey from any other artist. I mean, it's incredibly clever. It's incredibly well thought. And then not just the idea, but to deliver it in a perfect song is where the talent and the uniqueness of Morrissey really lies. And he's certainly not the only one who does things like this, but nobody does it better. A couple more good songs on the album. Let Me Kiss You is a twisted romantic ballad. It sounds like a romantic ballad but by the name, but when you hear it, it's kind of bizarre. Actually covered by Nancy Sinatra, of all people, who, believe it or not, very good friends with Morrissey. Morrissey and Nancy hang out. Very odd. And it only goes to serve the Morrissey myth that much more. And then, of course, one of the centerpieces of the album is First of the Gang to Die, which is a sort of 50s, 60s, almost doo-wop-ish thing, rockabilly flavor, but it's Morrissey sort of lyrically venturing into the barrio, if you will. You're standing on our street where Hector was the first of the gang to die. That kind of thing. Very gangsta in terms of a white English singer with a Mexican audience.
Where Hector was the first of the gang with a gun in his hand, and the first to do time, the first of the gang to die.
And the album did quite well sales-wise. It did better than most Morrissey albums. There was a successful comeback tour for the album, which at the end of that tour, Alan White left the band as a stage musician, although he stayed on to write songs Brian Wilson style for the next two albums. Which is possibly appropriate because many say that Alan White went nuts, and that's why he couldn't deal with touring anymore. Boz Borer, after Alan White left the tour, did an interview where he mysteriously referred to, quote, Alan's obvious illness, and elaborated no further than that. And Morrissey, in his autobiography, laments losing Alan White as a band member and kind of alludes to something maybe being not right upstairs, but nothing solid. And Alan White's never said anything, so nothing really to go by, other than the fact that after White left, Moz recruited a guy who had done some sessions with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, dude named Jesse Tobias, to be the lead guitar and a songwriter along with Boz. And Tobias remains to this day. He's probably technically a better guitar player than Alan White, and the band sounds great with him, but he can't write songs for shit. And this becomes massively evident on the 2006 follow-up to You Are the Quarry, the disastrous Ringleader of the Tormentors. On Ringleader of the Tormentors, which does have a great album cover, it's Morrissey playing a violin in a tuxedo. But on this album, Jesse Tobias writes 4 of the songs, and they are garbage. I mean, objectively. It's not a matter of taste. These songs are garbage. And Alan White wrote a few in his Brian Wilson style, but even his are substandard. Save for one epic, Life is a Pigsty. Boz Borer writes none, and that doesn't help things either. And what hurts the album even more, and possibly the most, is the production by former David Bowie producer Tony Visconti. Muddy, it's uneven, hard to describe really, but the production of You Are the Quarry was so crisp, so good at letting every instrument breathe and articulate and be legible. This album has none of that. And to be fair to Visconti, he was working with weak material, but even the good songs seem to suffer from a murky mix. Those good songs, you ask? I Will See You in Far Off Places leads off the album. It's a sort of Middle Eastern flavored, pounding rock song. It's got this gigantic bass drum that hits on certain accents, which would be awesome, and it sounds awesome live, but on this record, fucking distorts. And I've tried it on many a sound system. It fucking distorts. I mean, to get ultra technical, the compression on this thing is so fucked up that it actually like sucks in the sound from the rest of the song and then distorts on every hit. It's like the seismic charges in Attack of the Clones. It like sucks everything in, then blows everything out in a massive distortion. God-awful production. But Life is a Pigsty, as I mentioned before. This is one of the most depressing Moz songs in his history. Starts with a mid-tempo groove, and it's got the sound of thunder and rain, and then it morphs into this slow acoustic-driven song. And the song is about being on his deathbed, still unable to find love, not able to find the love of his life, just thinking about all the things that he regrets. Life is a pigsty. It's filled with echoes, reverberated electric guitars, there's screeching sounds. It actually does kind of sound like death is around the corner. It's another one of those songs where if you really want to wallow, Life is a Pigsty. One more song to mention on Ringleader of the Tormentors is a song called Dear God, Please Help Me. And this song is sort of Morrissey wrestling with his sexuality, and nobody needs to hear it. It is a very bizarre song where he talks about kegs exploding between his legs. It's very awkward. And what makes it worse is that he actually got Ennio Morricone to do the strings for this song. And they're wasted in Tony Visconti's production. They're buried in the mix. They're basically meaningless. Good opportunities wasted. And the rest of the songs on this album, skip. And let's move on to 2009's Years of Refusal. 3 years after Ringleader of the Tormentors, Morrissey came roaring back with Years of Refusal, with Jerry Finn, who produced You Are the Quarry, coming back to save the day. But as a sad side note, he actually passed away very shortly after this album was released, I believe of a hemorrhage or an aneurysm or one of those god-awful things that takes people too young. This album returned to an edgier sound that doesn't quite harken back to your Arsenal or Southpaw Grammar, but it kind of combines the elements that gave those albums their rock and roll bite and keeps the elements of keyboards and backup vocals and bigger production that You Are the Quarry had. Christine Young, who's a very odd sort of almost performance artist who opened for Morrissey for a while, she in particular does some ghost howling on the song That's How People Grow Up. And the album is peppered with things like that throughout. And it gives it a very broad feel. There's a lot of different styles, a lot of different types of sound. And in addition to that, the album is relentless. And the drumming, Jesus Christ, it's a tour de force of drumming. By far the best drumming on any Morrissey album. Morrissey got a guy named Matt Walker for this album, and he had done some work with Smashing Pumpkins, and such a good pick. Jesse Tobias has more of a hard sound than Alan White, and when you put him together with Matt Walker, they're like an animal. It's a great blend, a great band on this album. And there are even a few Alan White songs on this album, and a few great ones from Boz Boorer. And Alan White doesn't play on it at all, and actually, as legend has it, was thrown out of the studio when he wandered in uninvited, Syd Barrett style. But be that as it may, it was the last time he wrote for Moz, and with a few from Boz and 3 from Jesse Tobias, 2 of which are actually awesome, which goes against Jesse Tobias' usual trend. All You Need Is Me is a great song by him, hard rocker, and the album's closer, I'm Okay by Myself, song where Morrissey insists that he doesn't need a partner in anything, which begs the question, why can't Tobias write more shit like this? I mean, this song is almost punk, and this Matt Walker dude is playing drums like it sounds like he's playing 5 drum sets at once. It's amazing.
This might make you throw up in your bed. I'm okay by myself, and I don't need you, and I never have, no,
It's definitely up there in the top 3. You Are the Quarry, Your Arsenal, and Years of Refusal. Turns out if a Morrissey album starts with the letter Y, pick it up. And there's a couple more things worth mentioning on Years of Refusal. There's another reference to not needing a partner. That's a song, That's How People Grow Up, that I spoke of earlier, where one of the lyrics is, I was driving my car, I crashed and broke my spine. So yes, there are things worse in life than never being someone's sweetie. That doesn't even rhyme. When you read it out loud, God knows how is that a lyric? There's no structure, it doesn't rhyme. It's all in the melody, it's all in the voice. Check it out. It's a great song. Another one of my favorite lines comes from another song on this album written by Boz Boorer called One Day Goodbye Will Be Farewell. The lyric is, look at me, a savage beast. I've got nothing to sell. And when I die, I want to go to hell. Morrissey really does want to go to hell, I guess. I mean, his catalog is littered with this request. And after this album, Morrissey went back into weird mode. He started canceling gigs 5 hours before they were scheduled to start. He didn't re-sign with his record company, and so the next 5 years would see another self-imposed exile. Although he did write his autobiography during this time, so I guess maybe he wasn't that reclusive, but musically, nothing. And again, the touring, just a festival of cancellations. His autobiography, by the way, one of the weirdest things you could ever read. The first, I think, 14 pages or so are one paragraph. Literally one paragraph. His sentences go on forever. Sometimes the sentences rhyme. He talks about himself as a product sometimes, using his name in the third person, but then, going back to the regular first person. But it's not pretentious when he does it. I guess it is pretentious because everything Morrissey does is pretentious. But it's done in a way that actually evokes a sort of literary voice that is, again, unique. It's a challenging read. It's a tough read. The first line of the book, if I recall, is something very much along the lines of, Manchester is streets upon streets upon streets upon streets. Streets to define you and streets to confine you. And it only gets weirder from there. But finally, 2014, Morrissey reemerged with a very uneven album, World Peace is None of Your Business, and as of this podcast, this is his most recent album. Now, when I first listened to this album, as each song played, I made a mental note of whom I thought wrote the music, without looking at the liner notes, Boz or Jesse Tobias. And I was right every time, save for a couple of songs that were written by his new utility musician, Gustavo Manzel, who is brilliant. I saw him play live. He's amazing. He plays every instrument you can think of, including a didgeridoo. Yep, a didgeridoo. Plus, he's Latino, so Morrissey's Latino contingent of fans are quite pleased with him, and he brings a Latin flavor to some of to Morrissey's songs on World Peace is None of Your Business. He plays the fuck out of a nylon string guitar on Staircase at the University. But back to the guessing game on Boz Boorer versus Jesse Tobias songs. The Boz songs sounded like Morrissey songs, and the Jesse Tobias songs sounded like shit. The guessing was pretty easy. The Jesse Tobias songs are so bad. There's a song called Smiler with Knife. It goes on forever, and it changes keys like 5 times. It sounds like a Disney song, and then it goes into this sort of kind of decent, cool little groove jam with a guitar solo. Then it goes back to the demented Disney thing. and it's all about Morrissey getting stabbed in the back by someone who's smiling the whole time they're doing it. It's just, it's fucking weird. It's just not good. There's also a song called I Am Not a Man, where Morrissey describes the typical macho man and says, if this is what a man is supposed to be, I am not a man. This is something we already knew, but he reiterates it on I Am Not a Man. But Boz gives us the aforementioned Staircase at the University, Oboe Concerto, which is a great tune, and a classic Moz tune, Mount Joy, an acoustic bass song where Morrissey sings, the only thing that makes me cry is when I see the sky. Again, depressing but hilarious, and too many people, I just don't think they see the hilarious part. To come back full circle to what I started this whole thing off with, to wrap it up, you have to understand that Morrissey knows how funny and depressing his music is. He's not just sitting around talking about how he's crying. I mean, quite often he is, but the contexts, the situations he sets up, the stories, the characters he creates, the plays on words, the puns, and so on, and the voice. Oh, the voice. You put that all together with some great songwriters behind him, you've got one of the most important artists of the last 30 years. And I'm not going to back off from that statement. I truly believe that. And one more thing to talk about his authenticity, which I also mentioned in the beginning. After World Peace Is None of Your Business was out and not selling well, he kept writing open letters on his sort of website that is just a fan magazine where he emails the webmaster. It's really cheap looking. It's very 1996. You know, instead of having a flashy website, he just has this sort of like blog where he writes these open letters once in a while. But he wrote an open letter about how the record company sucked for not promoting World Peace Is None of Your Business, to the point where the record company said, you know what, Morrissey? How about we don't sell it at all? And they pulled it off iTunes and every other digital channel. Go try and find it. World Peace Is None of Your Business. Look on iTunes. Look on Google Play. You won't find it. And you know, I think that pleases Morrissey to no end. Who is fucked up enough to shoot themselves in the foot and kill their own album sales just to prove a point? That is rock and roll. That is rock and roll, my friend. And that is Morrissey. And that's why he's important. Just like you are. Because you gave me your time by listening. And I thank you. And I thank Morrissey. And I want to thank my future guests, Carla Kane and Coy Wynn. I promised you them in the last show. They're coming. But I did want to talk about Morrissey because I just got back from a trip to Europe and got to go to a few different countries that he sings about all the time. And, you know, I couldn't help thinking about the man once or twice on that trip. So wanted to go back and do this show that I've been planning for a while. Hope you enjoyed it. And I really hope you'll check out Morrissey on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever the fuck it is that you use. Morrissey, the Pope of Mope, the Chin, Moz, Minister of Manchester. Call him what you will, but respect his master's voice. He's too important to be ignored. Cue the hot chick.
Pop Talk and Aliens, the William Cleere podcast.
Earth is the loneliest planet of all.